Okay. Hello, and welcome to another episode of I Am Enough, the place where we embrace our wholeness. Today I have with me Abby Winn, and I've known Abby for over 10 years now, I think. It's been a while. But Abby is a shamanic practitioner, psychotherapist, mindfulness teacher, a Reiki and Seikhem master teacher, the author of 15 books, and host of the podcast Healing for Healers. She's been in private practice for over 15 years and worked with thousands of people, both one-to-one and in groups. As a therapist, Abby learned how to weave all her skills together so she could embody them all and work with whatever the client presented to her in the moment. Abby created a new... Sorry, I'm going to pause that. Can we start again? I do this, I tumble over everything. So I'm going to just,
Yeah,
you
sure.
can edit it out. I'm going to stop and then record again. All right. And I think it doesn't help. I'm looking down, but here, no excuses.
Which episode number is this for you?
10.
Okay.
So, so yes.
Good, good.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of I Am Enough, the place where we embrace our wholeness. Today I have with me Abby Winn, and I've known Abby for about over 10 years and excited to have her here. So Abby is a shamanic practitioner, a psychotherapist, a mindfulness teacher, a Reiki and Seikhem master teacher, the author of 15 books and host of the podcast Healing for Healers. She's been in private practice for over 15 years and worked with thousands of people on a one-to-one basis and in groups. As a therapist, Abby learnt how to weave all of her skills together so that she can embody them all and work with whatever the client presented to her in the moment. Abby created a unique way of working, which she's now developed into a life mastery practitioner training program, so others can now learn this unique way of working to support their own life mastery and to help other people reach their highest potential. Abby describes herself as a catalyst for people's healing processes, a problem solver, a creative artist, an alchemist, a healer, a mother, a daughter, a lover of life. You can find more about Abby at abby-winn.com and also more about the Life Mastery Practitioner Training on abbysonlineacademy.com, and the links will be below. So thank you for being here, Abby. I'm excited actually about this conversation. And I think for me, one of the things that you've really helped me with is actually accepting that I am enough as I am. And I took a quote from your website, which I've written down here, which is knowing who you are is the greatest gift you can give yourself.
Mm,
And I think for me, then I add on to that and accepting yourself as you are.
absolutely.
So, with that, I'd love to know a bit more about how you got to that journey of self exploration that led you to move away from your background and where you were working and to explore yourself and become a healer.
Well, it's interesting you say that, and thank you for having me on.
You're
I feel
welcome.
very honored. Um, because you're reading out there like a list of accomplishments, a list of labels of qualifications that I have
Yeah.
and things that I said. And for me, it's not about that. It isn't. Those are things I've done, things I've made. And when I'm writing a book, it's always the best book I've ever written because I'm here in the moment, appreciating each word that comes out from wherever it comes from. And being in the present moment, that's the key to everything because, carrying the weight of everything you've done, everything you haven't done, all the labels that you have, the labels that people gave you, the labels that you give yourself. For me, it's always been about stripping all that away. And if you strip away all of that, what's left? What is left? And that's the pure essence of who you are. And I think when we can look at life through that lens of here we are in the moment, if you didn't have any descriptors, you could still see who somebody is through, let's say, the integrity of their energy as it's there in front of them. And what's really interesting about this year being 2025, there's a renewal of value given to integrity and authenticity. It's not about being perfect, it's about showing up to the point where you show up in your wholeness, as opposed to choosing which aspect of me is acceptable to the other person because that's what I will show up as. And I think as we're coming out from, it's interesting because I have been looking a lot at this at the astrology, and as we come out from the new moon, which is the darkness, moving into the full moon, which is the wholeness, but the moon shines a light on all that is hidden. And
Mm.
our moon, for the last two full moons and the next two or three full moons, is being powered up by other planets as well. So it's almost like a laser focus on what's being hidden in these realms of finance, technology, knowledge, education. And I think as a human being, when you step into the humanity of yourself, you have great compassion. And I don't mean you, I mean people. Great compassion for the humanity and humility of other people. So I'll go back to when I would be standing up on stage in front of an audience, maybe for the first time, and my brain, nattering in the background, giving me all the reasons why I was going to be terrible, giving me all the reasons why, it wouldn't work. But I realized, if I was in an audience and someone came out on stage to speak to me and they dropped their notes or they tripped over a wire or they had a coughing fit, or their hair went out of place or any of that, I would find it in my heart to connect to them at a deeper level and to give them the space they needed to brush themselves down, to pick up their notes, to look at the audience and say, I'm not feeling great. I have a bit of a cough. You make that allowance for them.
Yeah.
And once I realized that, I thought, well, I could be the one up on stage dropping the book or having a coughing fit, and people would make an allowance for me. So why can't I do that for myself? And so I thought, well, I'm going to go up there and my hair is not going to be perfect. But if you can see me, my hair is a bit wild and it's going to do what it does. I had great difficulty taming it. Actually, I filmed a video class of one of my books for Hay House. And one of the things I wanted to do with the makeup artist was to do the hair. And I'm like, good luck with that. It didn't feel like it was me. Brush all the curls, put on the hairspray, and I couldn't move. I can't wear makeup. I can't even hide behind foundation. I can't do makeup. I can't do any of that stuff because for me, it's the quality of the moment, the quality of the presence in the moment. And that's been my whole journey. And to be able to sit in the quality of your own heart and to realize, I give myself the space that I would give to somebody else. I give myself the presence that I would give to somebody else. Then you really start to unpick the parts of you that you have difficulty with and realize that they're human parts too, and there's reasons for them, and your need to be perfect is less natural than the parts of you that you have trouble with. So allowing life to be messy. And I don't know if you remember this, but it was probably more than 14 years ago. There was a person on Facebook who wrote this poem about, love is messy, love is vomit on the floor, love is all of these things. And I'm like, but that's more than love, that's life. And I think the biggest fault comes down to the conditioning because we sit in front of the television and we see these perfect celebrities with their perfect hair and their perfect script and everything works really well, and we don't take into consideration that they take off their makeup or that the show is being edited or that they have a director telling them, no, say it again, say it again, say it again. You'll be saying the thing 10 times, 100 times. And then they pick the one that's the most perfect one. And that's the first one that we see. And we think that that's them doing it for the first time, and it isn't. So we're not giving them the opportunity to be messy. Now, I've been teaching the self-publishing masterclass with my friend Mark Atwood. And I explained to people that when you sit down to write a book, you don't write the final draft of the book. You write the vomit draft, which is messy and difficult and not perfect. And you can write notes to yourself in the book, which is, oh, I need to add a little bit more here about how this character looks. Or I don't know how we end up in this coffee shop. I'll need to put something in to get us there. And it's messy and we just don't allow ourselves that. And I think in the messiness is where all the beauty is. All the joyfulness. If you go into anybody's house where there are children, you get the joy, you get the love, and you get the messiness. So I allow myself to be messy. And that's probably why, I think I accelerated through a lot of my own spiritual personal growth because I didn't hold myself back from being messy and getting it right the first time. Does that answer your question at all?
There is so much in there. And it made me laugh that when you went onto that kind of went down that frame because, in full disclosure, I stopped the recording and started it again because when I was reading out what I'd written for Abby's bio, I kept tripping over myself. And again, it's that feeling that, okay, I've got to get this right. Personally, I think it's been one of my biggest challenges has been letting go of the perfectionism and holding myself back. But going back to it is those layers. And I remember one of our first sessions, I don't know which one, but it was very early on. So we're talking over 10 years ago. And it was when you introduced me to the aspect of the inner child. I'd never really come across that before. And I have this vivid image of this little girl in a pink nightie in the cellar. Now, I have to say, I've never had a cellar in any house that I've lived in, but it's what I had done to that part of myself
Mm.
because I had attached so many labels, believed I had to behave in a certain way. And therefore, my poor inner child was never allowed to be a child, to be playful, to come out and embrace that magic. And, when I knew we were going to have this conversation, that memory came back to me. And I think it is that allowing ourselves to be us is one of the biggest challenges we face. But just really looking at what you're doing, because I think even if we look at bringing together how you work, for me that listening to you just now, that's come from not being able to, it didn't work for you as being separate. And therefore, you talked about being messy, but it was almost, seemed more messy when it was separate, and you've both brought it together into a beautiful package now, allowing you to work in the way you do.
Well, I would say it's kind of more messy now because
Really?
when you compartmentalize the mind, so let's say talking about like houses, because,
Hmm.
and it's beautiful because a lot of the imagery, metaphors, images that I would have used, let's say when we were working, when I 14, 15 years ago, were not commonly in the language. And they are now. I mean, my friend did a visualization and she said, your house is the consciousness where you're living, which is beautifully put. And I've always felt that way. I've always said, so when I would have had an upgrade or feel like I'm expanding, I need to build another room onto the house of me. So you put your inner child in the cellar down below out of embarrassment for who she was. But if you were to look at the way I work with the cognitive is like a clean, tidy, crispy room up on the top of the house where you would allow visitors to come in. And you can keep everything there. You can put the emotional stuff in another room. You can put the aspects, the childlike things down below. But it's never whole.
No.
It's never whole. And I used to find when I was going to therapy in my 20s that it would take me the whole session to feel safe enough, let's say, to show my emotional self towards the end of the session where the therapist just didn't know what to do with that because he wanted to stay in this clean room where we can talk about things that are shapes that he could recognize, right? Whereas I had all these amorphous, difficult, spiky, heavy, you could just imagine it's like fantasy, it's dream work. And I would say, well, I'm not me without these things. So you could say that it's clean and tidy if you go into the room and all we're going to do is talk, but you don't actually transform anything. And for me, it's about the alchemy of taking all of those heavy emotional burdens, pains, whatever you want to call them, and transforming them into something beautiful. It's not about releasing them. It's not about cutting them away from you. If you decided you couldn't deal with the inner child in the cellar, you could just board up the cellar and just pretend that it doesn't exist and try to get on with your life. And something would happen. There'd be like a pressure cooker pushing up against the floorboards, and you would be entertaining a beautiful dinner with all of your favorite people, everybody there acting as responsible adults. And then the monster in the basement, which was the child, because it was so neglected, would burst through the floorboards and you wouldn't know what would happen. So it's back to that messiness, isn't it? It's back to saying, well, this is who I am and this is what I am. And I think when you give permission to yourself to see yourself as that, there's a tension in you that no longer exists. And people are drawn to that. And then they feel safe to be that as well. That's the domino effect, which is why, when I'm going to be teaching what I've called life mastery practitioner, because if technically or legally I say it's a psychotherapist, it's a shamanic psychotherapist, which is what I called myself, then they'll be looking for insurance. They'll be looking for legalities where I create something that's completely brand new, that encapsulates the essence of what it is that I want to emulate. I can't teach life mastery if I'm not the master of my life. Then I can't have somebody being a life mastery practitioner unless they can master their own lives. And if you're sitting there entertaining, your family in your living room, and down in the basement there's this monster that just wants to come and punch your father in the face or whatever it is that's unresolved. That's not mastery either. And there was a very telling moment for me, Lynn. I was in London and with a friend of mine, and we were having fun as rogue shamans on tour. You could imagine, so let's go into is it St. Paul's Cathedral in London and go and
Yeah.
clear out the crypt of all of the ghosts and bring down all this light. And it was so fun. It really was so fun. But you see, we saw the layer and the level of what we were invited to do there. We went, we did that, and it's not like we did anything amazing, but it's all a jigsaw puzzle, cogs in the wheel, and we were invited in energetically to do what we did. And we had the afternoon free. So what do we do for the afternoon? Now, doing that energy work is quite tiring, but we thought, well, we're quite, let's go to the Tate Modern because it sounds cool. So myself and my friend went to the Tate Modern because it sounded cool. And there's a pedestrian walkway over, I don't even know if it's over a river, but there's a pedestrian
Yeah.
walkway. And we were going on the pedestrian walkway, and as we were approaching the museum, there was a woman having a full-blown temper tantrum. I had never seen anything like it in my life. This woman was a grown woman. I think she actually had a child and she was there with her partner, and she was stamping her foot and tearing at her hair and pulling at her clothes and screaming. And I just looked at her and I thought, there's the inner child who's been totally ignored, who's been pushed down into that cellar, finally breaking through and acting out through the woman. And
Yeah.
for me, that was a real moment where I saw that we do this all the time, but never maybe to that extreme. And so this is why we have to open up the doors, open up the windows, open up, and invite all of the parts of ourselves in before we be able to really master our emotional reactions to things, because you could still be the master. And this is what I love about who I'm becoming, because I'm not her yet. But I get on the video, as you know, Lynn, and I say, I'm feeling crappy today. How are you? It's like, oh, she's not this glamorous person on a podium that's unreachable. She feels crappy today. I've never wanted to do that because we're all on this level playing field together. And that's really important, to not give unrealistic expectations to people. So,
Yeah. And I think going back, that is really important because the only way we're going to step away from that feeling of we need to be perfect is that actually that people show us that they're real. But going back to, just sticking with the different aspects of ourselves, the inner child has become quite common. But one of the things I love is that you then take us to the inner teen and then to the wounded adult, which often get forgotten about because throughout our lives we're having so many different things come up and challenges that we may be able to deal with, may not be able to deal with. And even when I was looking through, because your the inner teen work, it's things that you come back to that you don't realize. So there, I think it was around the creativity and just the expression and allowing yourselves to be. And you suddenly realize, oh yeah, I really did suppress myself then because I didn't want to stand out, and then very, you become so conscious about fitting in and belonging. And I know belonging was another big thing for me, particularly because we moved from the north of England to Scotland when I was about 10. And that whole thing of being different, having a different accent, coming from a different place, just even, connections. My family was very much, my dad was a big walker and, we spent time out in nature, and most people where we moved to didn't. And things like that, you really notice those differences. And at that stage, and there really does, it's just that awareness that for me, that it's okay to allow myself to express myself as I am. And and I think one of the things for me, when I trained as a coach was really recognizing that it was my own healing journey I had to do as well.
Mm.
And I think it's so easy for us to go through the training and then not take it any further and forget about ourselves. And as going back to your example of the lady there of suppressing her, herself, and it just explodes out. And I think in that, becoming the master of our lives is a lot harder, and we have to be a lot more vulnerable than we ever would suspect.
I don't know. I wouldn't say it's harder at all. When you're speaking there, it reminds me of reading like a murder mystery novel, right? Or you're watching a TV show where there's crime and you're wondering who's the villain, who did it, why did they do it, so you're projecting all of that intelligence that you have available to you. What's the red flags? Oh, I knew it was this because I remember when this thing happened at the beginning and it didn't fit for me. We're very good at picking up discrepancies and patterns.
Yeah.
And even on the road, even driving, when the guy in the car, two cars up or across the way, is acting odd and that he might swing into your lane without indicating, and you're prepared for that. That's how we're designed. We're designed to get from A to B. We're designed to look for impediments in the path. We're designed for when things don't fit into normal, natural patterns. But we don't fit into those patterns either. We've been trained. It's like our beautiful, if we were like birds with these fabulous feathers, they've been curtailed, they've been kept in. Nobody can be more glamorous, more what's the word, ostentatious, all of these things. We all have to just march in a line, and that's the school system for you. That's the school system where, sausages in a sausage factory and everyone comes out the same. And the beating into you of that filters into, the young adult as well. And I think there's many people with mental illness because they haven't been able to express themselves. And then the population as a whole has been told you're not allowed to have a difference of opinion to the main narrative over the last 4 years, which has been very difficult. And a lot more people are feeling free to speak out now because more people are giving them permission to. So there's going to be people always. I see myself as that actually, as somebody who cuts through really difficult, heavy energies to set a precedent to say, you're allowed to talk about this. You're allowed to not be happy with this. You don't have to fit in. You don't have to do these things that people think you have to do. And I think that's going to ripple, further in over the coming years where people are like, well, do I really have to send my child to school? Do I really need to go to university to get qualified? I mean, that's what I'm doing here is saying I'm going to be giving people the equivalent of a master's degree without actually giving them a master's degree. So do you qualify? Do you value the quality of what it is over a piece of paper? So I think we have to be patient with systems, with people, with understanding. It's like a wave coming in and people on the first wave, and then the wave and the second wave and the third wave. But something we don't value as much as we should is stillness,
Mm.
beingness, it's slowness. Like I was saying, everything is get from A to B. Anything that gets in the way of you going from A to B is annoying, because you're so focused on the end result, you're not focused on the present moment. Where you can sit and go, okay, is my heart open or closed? And how is that going to affect my afternoon? Does anybody ever ask themselves that?
Yeah. And I love how you've brought it back to the present moment again and how important that is.
Mm.
because it is that coming out of the head and in being coming back into that present moment.
Well, that's the heart would never allow an inner child piece to stay down in the basement.
Yeah,
Children don't belong in a basement or a cellar. It's the head, I feel, because it was one of the things that always annoyed me. Kill the ego, kill the ego. That's bullshit. Excuse my language. You need your head, but your head does not necessarily need to lead you through your life. It was the heart, is the holding, is the space. The head can navigate, help you navigate through something. And when you sit down and talk to the head, it's usually quite reasonable if you're presenting the argument from a heart-centered way. Yeah.
yeah,
But we've had that beaten out of us too, heart-centeredness. It's
yes,
survival mode all the time. It's being safe over lusciously grabbing the opportunities of having joy outside the lines. If you're in school, you're coloring in the picture, it has to be in the lines. Can't go
yeah,
outside the lines. Or you can't take a black pen and draw more pieces that you think should be there. Like you have a duck, and then you turn the duck into some remarkable flying creature, um, or space guy, and it's like you're weird. It's a duck. What the heck are you doing? I said, well, why not? So I think we're really at a fabulous opportunity where, instead of slapping a label on somebody and saying that explains their behavior, that you could actually just sit with them and listen to them.
and I think that's one of the biggest challenges for most people is actually listening because we've lost that skill of really being in that space and listening without interrupting where our brains are. And again, it goes back to being in the brain. And I think one of the things that I love about what you're going to be doing is the work brings us back to we're not just about our head. There's many different elements of us. We're looking at the different bodies, the physical, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual, the different layers of us in that. But just going back to, silence, the present moment, and listening, holding space. What are the challenges that you've found seen in developing those skills and just being there with somebody in
Well,
the
being
moment?
with somebody is very different to being with yourself.
Mm.
And again, I think it's really important to be able to be with yourself first. So if, let's say, as I've described earlier, the inner child being abandoned for so long, bursting through the floorboards, there could be any matter of little things that you didn't shove down coming up for recognition. And that's what's so beautiful about the whole idea of quantum healing, observing something changes it. So you sit there in the stillness. Now, I know you have been on boot camps with me, so I would have done for 10 whole years, twice a year, 14 days, where all I want is this is really all I want is for people to sit down for 10 minutes a day and be with themselves. That's all it was. That's all it was ever supposed to be. And you tell a story and you give them pictures and you have to keep them distracted because it's very difficult for people to just sit down for 10 minutes and just be. So there's ways of doing it, like what's coming up for me as I'm sitting here, I'll write it down and there it is. And now I'm coming back to being. But it's coming back up again. But look, you're in the notebook, you've been written down, and come back to me. And you have to go through a process where all the things that pull on you and eat you up, and it could be your own guilt, it could be anger from somebody that you love, or some unfinished business that you have, either it could even be something legal like tax, or whatever it is that's eating you up, to name it, to recognize it, and then to trust that it's okay, that these things are not closed yet, that they're in process. It's like we really love to tidy up the loose ends, finish the book, close, it's all done. But there are many things that are open at the same time. Conversations you haven't had yet with people, or weird things that people say, all those flags, all those patterns that weren't right. We have to sit there and go, but it keeps pulling you back to that. And it's all about feeling safe and secure in the moment. When you understand how we're wired, that's really what it's about. So if you become the master of your own life, what it means is that you're not allowing a wild horse to take you as the carriage wherever it feels like it wants to go. That's actually the chariot card in the tarot. You're taking the reins of the horse, and you're the one telling the horse, we can slow down now, we can go to a trot. And we're going here and we're doing this. And all of the urgencies and things that are pulling, you know, are not really urgent. Or if they are, you allow yourself to deal with it. If you could be sitting there and say, I really have to write this letter to this guy, I really have to say my piece, but I can't be still until I've done it, then go and do it. Go and do it to honor the need, because if the need is coming from your gut and it's something you've neglected to do, then it's your intuition is telling you all these things that you're ignoring. So it's a relationship. Being able to be still with yourself is the most primary and most important relationship that you could ever have with anyone. It's the relationship that you have with yourself, all of the aspects of yourself. And just like you meet someone for the first time, you're not going to have a magical relationship with them. It's going to grow and build and trust, and you'll have your wobbles and you'll have your whatever, and then you come back because you're putting the effort in. And it's the same with the relationship with you. So you sit and you say, my intention is for me to sit still for 10 minutes. And if I can't do it, I'm not going to be upset. What I do want to do is understand why I can't do it, and just name those things. And even, back to that observer, I'm observing myself, naming these things, and I don't need to do anything about it. I'm just naming them. And then you realize, oh my God, I'm still deeply upset about something my mother said last week. And I didn't realize how upset I was. And that upset was hiding in the layers of the complexity of who I am, because I was distracting myself with more day-to-day focus. So what are you going to do about that? Well, just naming it means I'm giving myself space now to release the grief. My mother's never going to change. So you allow that to come through. And then you give it to yourself. And then something is in you is eased. Because what we look for is validation.
Yeah.
And we look for validation so strongly in the other that when our need for validation is so strong, we're not interested in the other and their need for validation too, which just goes back to what you said. How can you sit with somebody else and listen to what they're saying when you need them to validate you? Oh, yeah, that's just the same for me. And this happened to me and that happened to me. And it shuts down the interaction completely. So that's compassionate listening, which I will be teaching, but it's not enough for me to teach it. We have to practice it. You have to practice it regularly. You have to build in your ability to not rush in and change and fix things, just observing them with compassion. So, because we can't jump in and fix other people's lives, and sometimes we can't even fix things in our own lives, but maybe they're not supposed to be fixed. Maybe we're supposed to sit with the discomfort and allow that discomfort to change us.
Yeah. And just there going to the practice, because I think that's a huge thing. And one of the things, another thing that I've always loved with your work is that you are looking to teach people. And, you've been doing this for years through all of your sessions, that you're teaching people how to learn the skills so they can apply them to themselves, through your boot camps, through the online training courses that you already do. And I remember doing there was a course you did around shamanic journeying, and I think it's an introduction to what a shaman was. And I remember going through it and thinking, I don't know that I'd ever be able to really do this. And part of it was really, so there was the belief. And then when I realized I think it was a while later, you said something about just in allowing your imagination and coming at things from a place of curiosity. And it kind of clicked with me. It was like, oh, and again, it'd gone back to I was having to do it in a certain way, but
Mm.
just allowing that imagination, but also practice. And I think that's something that for me, it's our journey is, it's a journey, it's step by step and it's practicing. And, and I think, going back to life mastery, it is all about taking those steps and practicing being compassionate to yourself.
You
And I
know,
think that,
um, when I have clients who tell me they meditate, I always ask them, what do they mean by that?
mm,
I said, oh, I take 10 minutes or I take 15 minutes, whatever I do. And I said, yes. I said, but what do you actually do when you meditate? And I've discovered over the years that it's more beneficial to do the practice I just discussed with you.
mhm,
Set an alarm on your phone for 10 minutes and just be with whatever comes up for you. So you're not repeating a mantra, you're not trying to stop thinking, you are not trying to stop thinking. You are just being with yourself in your fullness, in your wholeness, in a slow way. And if people just did that every day, that's all they need to do. It really is. Show up for yourself and do that. Um, because I've found the infiltration of spirituality, spiritual practices, is just riddled with pure evil. And I have no hesitation to say it now. I have absolutely no hesitation. It came up. I mean, myself and my husband, we like to sit on the sofa together in the evening and just spend time together. He does his thing, I do my thing. And sometimes we watch a show together. And in the show, transcendental meditation came up as a practice that one of the people did. And I just said, could I just stop the show for a minute? And we stopped the show. And I told him about transcendental meditation and how I believe it's an entry point into somebody's psyche to siphon off their energy because they're repeating a mantra in a language that they don't understand, that's been programmed to allow them to relax to a certain degree. But ultimately, anytime I've ever asked anybody what the mantra means, they've never known or understood. Oh, my teacher gave me this. What does that mean? My teacher gave me this. So I had a client and I said this to my husband because there's a lot about me. Obviously he doesn't follow me into these sessions and he's able to now as we've matured and grown, he's interested in things I've experienced. I said, I had a man as a client who came to me in my room in Ireland and he has a very commanding presence. I don't know if he was like 6'5". He's big and he wore a long black coat and he was quite troubled when he came to me. And it ended up that he was doing transcendental meditation and he was getting depressed. He was having anxiety. He was having all these things. And so I said, well, I think it would be good if you could stop doing the transcendental because let's just then see what the impact is on everything else in your life. So he said, I don't know, I don't feel like I want to do that. And I said, fine, it's up to you. I'm just making suggestions. You have to decide what to do. So he came back to me then in another session. He said, I'd like your support because I'm going to tell them I'm not doing it anymore because he would go to the group. So he told them and they reacted like he was in a cult and he was leaving. And they needed to keep him there. They wanted to get their claws in and to keep him there. And I said to my husband last night, it wasn't like he was in a cult. He actually was in a cult. So when people do spiritual practices that have been handed to them by teachers and they don't really understand it, but someone else told them it was good for them, you don't need that. What you need is to be able to look at yourself in a mirror and just go, that's me. And I don't hate being me. I mean, if that's all you can do, or say, it's okay being me, or say, oh, look how old I am. Look, if you look at yourself in the mirror and think, I'm a horrible person, you have a lot of work to do. So by being able to be with yourself, again, you open it up and all the rooms in your house of the consciousness of who you are can open and you don't feel afraid to go from room to room. And I don't think you need to take a mallet and knock down all the walls and live in one big open plan house because you need to keep certain things in certain rooms. I have my children in one room, I have my work in another room, I have my writing in a room, but I meet myself there all the time. And it's just such an interesting time to be alive. It's really simple. All of these things are the same thing over and over again. And it's really difficult for people to do it. So,
And just I love how you say it's really simple. And it was like when we look at how we see the world and how right now and how complex we see it as, and then you bring in and it's really difficult for people to do it because I think we do see it as really complex. And it goes back to our perceptions and beliefs.
yeah,
And
and conditioning. And when you bring the
yeah,
world into that equation, you can see so clearly that the world is designed to make something simple incredibly complicated and difficult. No, do it this way. Here's your mantra. This is the best for you. No, you should be eating these ingredients. No, you need to follow this person. You have to watch this TV show. You need to keep your eyes on the news over here. They're coming to get you. And you could say, okay, who's the good guys and who's the bad guys? They're all bad guys, all of them. Anyone that takes you away from yourself is not, we're not valuing ourselves enough to see this. That's for me is a crescendo right now of all the things that you could possibly imagine to distract you. And if it's not enough, we're coming into your backyard. I will distract you in there too. But if you say no more, no more. If some poor waif and stray shows up at my house and I'm able to help them in any way, then I will. And that's enough. It goes back to, being enough. I can't save the world. I can't transport myself to the war zones. And, there are people who are doing that. And if they come to me for help and support, which some of them have, I'll help and support them so they can pick themselves up and go back out and do that again. We're all made differently. We all have different callings. For me, as you read out the name of my podcast, Healing for Healers, I want to have such support so that so many people who heal can go back out there in the field and do what they do best and be comfortable doing that and know that that someone has their back. That's what's important. We have to work together as a community together. Whereas, you go out through the school system, it's like, no, you're supposed to work in an office. You're supposed to wear these corporate outfits that don't quite fit you, that make you feel uncomfortable. So you shrink
yeah,
every day to sit in a room that's open plan, that you can't breathe or you can't read the paper or do what you want to do because somebody's always over your shoulder and you're sitting surrounded by 100 people who are exactly the same energy as you, all of them fitting into these corporate outfits. What happened in COVID when people were told to work from home and they just wore their tracksuit and they didn't have their manager behind them was such a freedom for people to start questioning, well, I don't want to go back in the office. I don't want to be doing this. And who is it that I married again? And why am I with them? Well, here I'm stuck in the house with them for a year because we can't leave. And then we have to sort this out or not. So it is when people say it's an awakening, it is an awakening. But people are all at different layers and levels of awakening. And, we need to have patience. We need to have patience with ourselves and with everybody else and with the world as well.
Yeah. So within I'm just going to come back to the life mastery practitioner training, and there's so many layers in that in itself. But you've touched on what you want to do, healing for healers, and helping people to get out there and go into it, to go into what they are good at in the world. Going back to the practitioner training, you know, I guess who is the type of person that you that will want to do that?
That's an interesting question.
Mm,
That's a very interesting question. I think people who are already trained as therapists in one or two different modalities in the healing arts probably feel they're not enough.
mm,
I know people who mission is to collect as many certifications as they can. And even when they're practicing with clients, they still feel they're not enough. They need more. The only thing that's missing for them is their own presence with themselves. So I would love to be able to offer people a way to get out of that addiction of needing more certificates, out of the need to do more. People used to come to me for 2 or 3 sessions, even 1 or 2 sessions, to break habits of always needing to go to therapy because they felt like they needed to. So I would love to attract people who are doing that, but also know that they need other skills, other, quivers in their bow, more to offer. Anybody could come and take the practitioner course and not be a practitioner and just feel that they're a practitioner of life, learning, psychotherapy skills. I'm going to be teaching cognitive behavioral therapy because our brain needs to come along with us for the ride. So learning how to hold thoughts, how to have conversations can help you just as a person
yeah,
who is living with other people, which is everybody. You know, Being the actual practitioner is up to you. I'll be teaching business parts of that so that I'm not leaving anybody, wondering, well, what do I do? How do I set my shingle and open the door? I'll be doing all of that. But I'd like to be helping people who might be feeling trapped in their current job and might never have done any healing before, or might be healing, like working in a hospital as a nurse. I've got somebody who's a nurse who's in their 60s who's interested, there must be more. There's another way because we're at a turning point in the world where more people are recognizing that they need healing, more holistic healers with that sense of wholeness are required. The difference between sitting down with somebody, as I said earlier in the podcast, who just wants to keep you in the clean, bright, white room of the mind, and sitting down with somebody who doesn't care if it gets messy. Who
yeah,
would you rather sit with? So anybody who's willing to learn how to sit in their own mess and then you're not inviting anybody into your mess. What you're doing is creating a space where somebody feels safe enough to, first of all, even just admit that their interior world feels like it's a mess and might be able to gain trust to show you just a little bit of it, where they go away feeling like it's okay to have a messy interior world and it's okay. It's that's all it is. So, there's a lot of work involved. I'll be teaching mindfulness. You could just do the mindfulness part and become a mindfulness practitioner and just work on that. I'll be teaching energy healing so that you can heal the body. Bringing the healing aspect in to the mindfulness aspect is incredibly powerful. Facilitating groups. I'm going to be teaching, there's so much in this. I'll be teaching people how to facilitate a group through mindfulness, and I'll be giving people a 6-week template for groups that you could do either online or you could rent, a room in the school or the local community center and have actual people show up and you could bring them through a process that will allow them, and it all comes down to this, to be able to be in the moment with themselves, not want to run away from themselves, open their heart of compassion towards themselves, but then teaching people who are strong enough and able to deal with whatever comes up in that moment. Because if that child bursts through the floor in your client, how do you hold space for that as the therapist? So we'll be looking at all of those things too. I think we really need a new way to heal, to hold people. Psychotherapy on its own doesn't work because the brain might know, well, I have to give myself space to grieve. But the brain doesn't give us space to grieve. The brain might know, well, I'm very angry at this thing. But the brain does not sublimate the anger. But when you put another layer on top of it, your ancestral patterns, your past life patterns, you could go to a past life healer and clear all your past lives, but your brain is still holding the pattern of what it was that you did and doesn't understand what just happened. So what if you can go and learn as a life mastery practitioner how to clear past life patterns, because that's the shamanic work that we'll be doing. Clearing the past lives, clearing the ancestors, clearing your Akashic records, rewriting your contracts, learning how to remove emotional energy that you're just carrying around because you feel obliged to do it because it's not yours, but you were the inner child, the peacemaker, the empath who feels terrible looking at somebody in pain and crying. And so you'll just absorb it like a sponge, carry it around with you and not realize that that's actually why you're depressed. So to be able to clear somebody's energy, clear the space of a room. And yes, being very upfront, there are entities and attachments and other beings out there that shouldn't be there. It's like if you go to the forest and come back covered in cobwebs and spiders, and then the flies get stuck in the cobwebs, and you're like, I don't feel well, and the doctor can't find anything wrong with me. It's like, because you're covered in energetic cobwebs that are catching spiders and flies and worms and all kinds of other things. And look, let's clear all of that away. And then suddenly they feel better. That's what I want people to be able to do, all of these things, to be able to appreciate that we're multidimensional beings. And then you need to tell the brain, well, look now, your energy was in a bad way. We've just healed your energy. So when you say, I'm depressed, why don't you retrain your mind to say how you're actually feeling in the moment instead of pulling out this phrase that you've been repeating over and over again for years because somebody diagnosed you with depression. What would it be like for you to imagine yourself well, not depressed? So there's going to be a lot of that too, healing the blocks that people have to get better, which is, well, if I'm well, and if I'm the master of my life, and if I wake up in the morning happy, enthusiastic, then I'm obliged to do all these things that maybe I just don't want to do. Then I'm supposed to have my happiest life, and maybe it won't happen that way. Say, well, this is you being the master and saying, I can have a day off. I make the fun for me, and I haven't been doing it, so let's make some more fun. We need a new archetype. I've said this for years, that. The archetype of the best healed self. Where the heck is that? We've got the archetype of the diva, we've got the computer programmer, we've got the damsel in distress, we have the narcissist, we have the empath martyr.
Yeah.
So this is the time to be creating that.
Yeah. And it is that challenge because I know you've said before, it's like, how do we imagine, what that best healed self is?
Well,
Because
it's what I
we're
said
not taught
earlier
to.
then. If somebody walks on the stage to give a speech and they trip over their feet or they drop their glass of water, then we make the space for them to be the human being that they are. And they say, oh, I just tripped. I just got my glass of water. Oh, well, I'm here to talk. I'm going to give the talk. And we would all accept that. And
Yeah.
that's the energy that we need
For ourselves.
for ourselves, for humanity.
Yeah.
Say, well, I like to wear makeup and I like to wear men's clothes and I want my hair like this and I want my hair like that. And they're fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. You go and you do you. People say that all the time, you do you, but they don't really know what that means because they're not doing you. They're doing what they think other people think the you is. They say, well, actually, I like to be messy. I like to wear tracksuits. I like jeans. I don't wear makeup. And I'm going to show up as me. I'm doing me. Are you really doing you, or are you putting on a facade for someone else? Healing is releasing all of the parts of you that are not actually you, the parts that you've adopted over time to be accepted, to be belonging. Keep quiet, keep quiet. The parts of you that you transformed so that you could survive your childhood. But they're not you. They're trying, they're hurting.
Yeah. And that really links back to, as well, the labels that we put on ourselves that you brought up right at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful link back. So, one final question for you, and it's if you could change one societal belief that would help everyone in humanity, what would it be?
Wow, that's a big one.
Mm.
Societal belief. I mean, for me, it's always, that saying namaste,
Yeah.
which is the divine in me sees and honors the divine in you. Yeah, well, if I could get people to actually do that instead of just talk shite. So when they actually realize that there is divine soul essence, not just in every person, but in every flower and every blade of grass and every animal, that they would sit down and eat things in honor of the life force, in the cabbage, in the steak, everything is alive, then that would change everything, I think. If people would go and talk to the land and honor the life force energy of the land and say, is it okay if I build my house here? Is it okay if I dam this river up? What would you feel? How would you commune? The land might say yes, the land might say no. We're all suffering at the moment from floods where I live because there was a statement made by the government to say you're not to build houses beyond this field. 3 years later, there are three more fields beyond the beyond. The water, the river water, the rainwater has nowhere to go. The water
Yeah.
table is overflowing and we're all flooded. And oh, it's climate change. It's not climate change. It's not climate change. It's concrete and houses in places that should be breathing green and free, not living in harmony with the land. We need to live in harmony. So I don't know if it's a direct answer to your
No,
question.
it is, and I love that, and it's interesting because I never knew what namaste meant because people just use it, and as you say, it's used. I would say a lot, or in when it's used in the Western world, it's not necessarily used with that meaning, and so hearing that behind it and just it just has me imagining um, what life could be like because it actually causes you to pause
Mm.
instead of rushing in.
Well, on another podcast, somebody asked me if you could wave a magic wand and make a wish, what would that be? And I said, I wish that everybody could see everybody else's soul.
Mm,
So you would see people who are liars because the lies would be darkness in their soul. You could see people who are good and it would encourage more people to be good. But above all of that, you would see, as well as seeing yourself in the other, you would never want to hurt anybody again.
yeah.
You would never want to hurt anybody again. And you would see the darkness in yourself. I want to change that. And for me, that's what it's about. That's what it's about. That's what all of this distraction is about. That's what all of this healing is about. Can you stand before God at the end of your life? He doesn't want to talk to you. All of this, sit down and go through your life story and, that they say in the spirit, that doesn't matter. God knows you. If you have chosen to know God, you don't have to talk about anything with God. You're already there or you're not there. I had an image, a vision of a really bad, evil person, standing before God and burning up into nothingness. And then I realized I don't have to worry as long as I hold myself accountable to myself and the values that are important to me. God will look after the rest. And what that does is that narrows your need to fix and heal everybody down to the people that show up for you.
Yeah,
And that's what I'm here for, to help people be able to be of service at the best way that they can, and then for me to be of service for them. So
beautiful. Well, thank you so much. And that's
thank
an
you.
amazing
I've
place
enjoyed
to end. So
it.
thank you. And I will see you soon.
Bye bye. Thanks for having me.
Bye. Thanks.